Okay, I guess everybody knows I slipped over to the restroom. Even members of Congress have to go shit. Well, thank y'all very much for coming out today. I apologize that some are having to stand here. Anyway, Mayor, thank you very much. And again, I apologize for those who have to stand. I appreciate, as always, the opportunity to come here to Mineola and Wood County and talk to you about what's going on in the nation. And I think everybody has the recent Supreme Court ruling on their mind. I know that I do. So I want to spend a little bit of time. I'm fond of saying I have an open mind, but it is not an empty mind. So I don't want to be shy and I don't want to be coy about my own opinions, but I am anxious to hear from all here, particularly those who may have a contrary opinion to my own. And I certainly know from my email and telephone calls, a number of my constituents do have different opinions than my own, and I'm always willing to have my discretion informed. But I want to tell you, in my opinion, why I thought the case was wrongly decided and why I still think the policy needs to be repealed, and we need to replace it. There still needs to be something else. Healthcare is still broken in America. But let me first talk about the Supreme Court decision. And Brian, I'm sorry, I didn't thank you publicly for coming out here, keeping everybody informed, entertained, whatever else that you did. And thank you for always being there for me. My guess is it could be weeks, if not months, for constitutional scholars to continue to pore over this decision. I have not read the entirety of the decision. I have read portions of it. But let me give you my impression. I kind of feel like the Supreme Court was a little bit like my son's second grade teacher. My son's going into the third grade, but I could almost envision my son handing in a test to his teacher. And his teacher saying, "Travis, you missed 5 questions, which means you have a failing grade. But luckily for you, I took the liberty of changing your 5 answers, making them right, and so now you have a passing grade." So it seems to me the majority opinion, you almost have Chief Justice Roberts for the majority saying, the individual mandate is unconstitutional under the Interstate Commerce Clause. So you failed. But we're going to take the liberty of rewriting the law ourselves as the Supreme Court and turning it into a tax, notwithstanding the fact that there is a clear taxation chapter in the law already, the individual mandate being there. And it's clear the intent of Congress, because every single proponent of this bill said it wasn't a tax. But we're going to take the liberty of turning it into a tax. So here's your law back, graded constitutional. Now that's kind of what I thought was done here. And I was very saddened when the ruling came out, regardless of the policy. There's something far, far more important than the policy. And it is the sanctity and the viability of the foundation of the Republic, and that is the Constitution. Period, paragraph. Far more important than any policy included in the President's health care plan. And my fear is, be it the Interstate Commerce Clause, the Enumerated Powers Clause, the Necessary and Proper Clause, as one who views himself as a limited government conservative, I'm not really sure what's left of limited government under those provisions of the Constitution, given the majority opinion. And so I am fearful of that. I mean, what is next? Can Congress now pass a law mandating that you eat broccoli on Tuesdays, and if you don't, we tax you? Can Congress now pass a law mandating that you join a health club, the health club tax, and if you don't join one, we're going to tax you? Traditionally, Congress has taxed activity, not inactivity. We all know about the so-called sin taxes. And now it is going to be a sin to sit in your own home and mind your own business if Congress so chooses to tax you. Again, maybe there are, for a limited government conservative, maybe there are silver linings of the big gray cloud. The court did rule that under the Interstate Commerce Clause, the President's health care program went too far. Possibly it might mean that future Congresses have to explicitly tax activity that they had otherwise ruled unlawful. I don't know the answer to that. Again, I think it could take some weeks or months to sort out. But I do not believe that Thursday was a good day for personal freedom. I do not believe it was a good day for the Constitution. I do not believe it was a good day for patient-centered health care. And let me touch upon 3 reasons why I think the law should still be repealed, and then I'll open it up for questions and comments. Number 1, this is a bill that weighs in, according to the Congressional Budget Office, at roughly $2 trillion. This is a nation that has incurred more debt in the last 3.5 years than the previous 200. If you don't know that, I want that to soak in for me. This nation has incurred more debt in the last 3.5 years than the previous 200. This nation has now had its first $1 trillion plus deficit, second $1 trillion plus deficit, third $1 trillion plus deficit, and now we are well on our way to our fourth $1 trillion plus deficit. At some point, you gotta quit spending money you don't have. America has to quit spending money it does not have. $800 billion of new taxes. Medical device tax, investment tax. There are 21, I believe, 21 new taxes contained within the legislation. $800 billion. Then, for those who were proponents of the bill, who said that health care would become more affordable, the average family of 4 now pays $2,200 more a year for a policy than they did when the law was passed. So with all due respect, when it comes to small businesses, taxpayers, American families, and our dwindling federal treasury, the Affordable Care Act has not proven so affordable. Next point, why I think the law needs to be repealed. I need not tell you that although, thanks to enlightened leadership in Austin, led by people like Ryan Hughes, Texas has a far better climate for jobs and the economy than most states. But as a nation, our economy continues to struggle. We have the slowest, weakest recovery in the post-war era by any measurement whatsoever. We have millions who are unemployed, millions more who are underemployed. Half of all college graduates today can't find a full-time job. For all I know, many of them are stuck living with you. I don't know. So we have one of the worst economies we've had since the Great Depression. And I got to tell you, whether I'm speaking to small business people in Wood County, whether I'm speaking to Fortune 50 CEOs in Dallas, Texas, what I always hear is the number one impediment to creating new jobs is government red tape, government regulation, and the president's health care is number one on the list. My favorite restaurant in Terrell, Texas, the owner told me, I want to say, told me he had 46 employees. He told me he would never go beyond 50 because of the president's health care. I hear that from all kinds of small business owners. Not going to have more than 50 people. Not going to get into Obamacare. In Jacksonville, I'm going to be in Jacksonville later this afternoon. I visited a small business tool and die company, and their whole clientele is medical device manufacturers. The medical device tax, which by the way, if you don't know, is on gross receipts, not even profits. He said he's talked to his customers, and because of the medical device tax and the president's health care plan, he's going to have to lay off half his workforce. I heard from a construction company in South Garland, which is part of the 5th Congressional District. Guy wrote me and he said, I have already spent $375,000 over the last 2 years complying with the President's health care plan. And as many of you know, it's not even fully implemented until 2014. He said, I've already spent $375,000. I've had to lay off 6 people, and I'm foregoing millions of dollars of business and the new hires that could go with it. Now, that's just kind of a microcosm of what I'm seeing in the 5th Congressional District of Texas. So number one, I don't think we can afford it. And number two, it is hurting our economy. It is hurting job creators in their effort to try to bring about jobs, hope, and opportunity. Last and not least, and perhaps most importantly, and I respect people who have a different view, and I know there's a lot of them in the 5th District, probably some in the room today. I respect you, but I don't believe the quality of the health care for my loved ones is going to be improved by this legislation. I just do not believe it. 159 new boards, commissions, and programs are created under the President's health care law. I wish this chart was a little bigger. This comes from the Joint Economic Committee, but here's a way to envision it. Here's you and your family. Here's your doctor over here. This is what's in between with respect to the new health care law. How many of y'all have heard of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, known IPAB? Raise your hand. Well, I hope a whole lot more of you start to learn about it. The Independent Payment Advisory Board is one of the 59 boards and commissions and programs created under the law. 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, none of whom are required to have medical training, will now be in charge of deciding which treatments Medicare will cover and which treatments Medicare will not cover. No appeals process whatsoever. It will take an act of Congress signed into law by the President of the United States to overturn a decision of the Independent Payment Advisory Board. Once you're appointed for a 7-year term, and you can get reappointed for another term. So again, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who can serve almost 15 years, none of them have to have medical training, can start making decisions about the health care of our seniors. Now, in my age bracket, I'm kind of an in-betweener. My mom is turning 80. Don't tell her I told you. My dad, he doesn't care, is turning 84. Is that my sound system? Is this the sound system doing that? Sorry about that. The mayor who does it all. Good enough. I don't know if that was a little duct tape there or whatever. See how it works. But, I'm blessed. Frankly, not everybody my age still has their parents here, but they've had their health care challenges. And in the time that they have been on Medicare, roughly 20 years, I have seen them go from waiting days and weeks to see the doctor of their choice to now waiting weeks to months, is what I'm seeing with my parents. I haven't really seen the quality of their health care degrade, but I fear it will under this. I believe that essentially the price controls that are going to be imposed by the President's health care plan, and if you bring 30 million people who weren't on the rolls onto the health care rolls, and you're going to ratchet down price, ultimately it's going to come from access. By one estimate, 40% of all Medicare providers today could be insolvent under this system. That means they leave. That means you don't get to see the doctor of your choice when you want to see him or her. And when we were told that you could keep your doctor, well, if your doctor's not practicing anymore, you can't keep your doctor. And when we were told you could keep your healthcare system if you're working at one of the local factories here, well, if your employer decides to quit covering you and dump you into the local exchange, you can't keep your plan. And millions will lose their current health care, in my opinion, under this plan. I've talked to a lot of doctors, and granted, this is an unscientific survey. But one of the questions I asked them is, how many of you have recommended to your children that they follow in your footsteps to practice medicine? It's a noble profession, it's a calling. But with the complexities and challenges, things like the President's health care law, I've probably talked to now 100 different doctors in the 5th Congressional District. I asked them, how many of you have recommended to your children they follow in your footsteps? Any guesses? Guesses? No. See, 0, 0, 0, wrong. 2. I granted it's an unscientific survey, and there was about a dozen who said, I don't know, but all the rest said, I've had somebody who said my father or grandfather was a doctor, but like 3 generations of doctors, but I'm telling my son to go to business school. God forbid, go to law school. Okay, full admission, I'm trying to live it down. I was a lawyer once too. Okay, so I'm not picking on you. But seriously, what does that say about the quality of healthcare in the future? When so many doctors are saying, I just don't want my children to do it. I'll leave you with this story too. I was in Jacksonville and met a doctor who was born in Canada, raised in Canada, went to medical school in Canada, practiced medicine in Canada, and then I met him practicing medicine in Jacksonville, Texas. I'm thinking, well, how does a guy from Canada make it all the way down to Jacksonville? I said, well, why did you come? It'd take a lot to get me to leave Texas, much less America. That's a very profound decision to leave the country of your birth. And he told me something I thought was incredibly profound. He said, in Canada, the government would not allow me to get the health care I knew my patients needed. And that caused him to leave the country of his birth and come down here, and now the Canadian healthcare system is following him to America. Now, some people have said, well, Congressman, why are y'all going to hold this vote? You've already voted to repeal Obamacare. The answer is, yeah, we have. But something's new. The people who told us that we ought to support this law told us we'll never tax anybody who makes less than $200,000. Well, according to a 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court, you're doing just that. The individual mandates a tax. It's the only way it can be found constitutional. Individual mandate, tax. Don't ask me, ask Chief Justice Roberts, although my guess is he's keeping low right now. Yeah. So we got good facts. So everybody who told the American people they wouldn't support that tax, they'll have an opportunity to cast their yays and their nays. Frankly, I think I would be negligent as a member of the House of Representatives if I didn't encourage that we have a vote on this, something that's right front and center in front of the American people. And again, we've got new facts that we did not have. It is time to hear the yeas and the nays, the yeses and the nos. And again, I don't mean to make light of the fact. All was not wine and roses prior to the passage of this health care plan. But most people liked the quality of their health care. It was the affordability and portability. So I think we ought to repeal it. But as we replace it, we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. 2,700 pages, by the way. I'm just guessing 6 pounds, I don't know. But this is what a 2,700 page bill looks like. But we don't want to repeat the mistakes of passing a 2,700 page bill behind closed doors that you had to vote for it before you could know what was in it. There's a lot of common sense solutions that we can work on a step-by-step basis. Number one, right now you got, for many people, their employer picks their health insurance for them because of a tax benefit. That benefit ought to run to you. Your employer doesn't take money away from you and then go off and buy your car insurance for you. You need to be in charge of that. And by the way, for a lot of Americans, we really don't have health insurance as much as we have a prepaid health care plan. What if the federal government passed a law that says every employer has to deduct, I don't know, $7,000 out of your annual wages to pay for your groceries, and then every time you go to the grocery store, you only pay a $5 code? I don't know about you, but I'd be eating a whole lot more steak at Bluebell. Cost consciousness. Maybe it's not popular. Everybody needs some skin in the game. We want a system where healthcare is portable, affordable, it's of high quality. And we want to make sure that no one debilitating disease wipes out a lifetime of savings. We all need a catastrophic policy. But everybody has to, people need to be in charge of their own health care, and there has to be cost sharing. Again, if I bought my groceries like I bought my health care, I would eat a whole lot differently, and so would my dog. I shouldn't have said that because I don't have a dog. My kids want me to buy it. My wife said there would be no more mouths to feed. Medical liability reform. Okay, they did it in Texas. Made a huge difference in the cost and access. I mean, doctors were just bailing out, particularly in OBGYN. I've seen studies showing that defensive medicine, not medicine that doctors feel you need, but they fear litigation. I've seen studies ranging anywhere from 15% to maybe as much as a third of our health care is all defensive medicine driven. One more common sense solution. Buying health care across state lines, you can buy your auto insurance, you can buy your home insurance, but you can't buy a health insurance policy on the other side of the state line in Texarkana. The very same individual, very same policy can cost twice as much in New Jersey than it does in Kentucky. You know, maybe we ought to give markets some opportunity to work. Now, that's just a few common sense solutions. There's a lot more we need to work on. But the American people want to be involved in this process from step one. And so again, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. I am profoundly, profoundly disappointed in the ruling of the court. Again, because this is far more important than that. And so we will go. The Supreme Court was heard from on Thursday. The House of Representatives will be heard from next week, and you, the people, will be heard from in the first Tuesday of November. And that's the way it's going to work. Okay, we got a lot of people here. House rules, if you could keep your question or comment to no more than 2 minutes. I'll try to call on everybody once before we get around to calling on people twice. And again, in a system as ours, I want to be fair. So if I'm hearing folks from one side of the argument, I might find out if there's somebody else on the other side of the argument. We'll recognize them. Sir, you got the first question or comment.
I understand that Obama, under the bill, is hiring 16,000 IRS agents to enforce Obama.
I believe that to be true as I look around for my trusty aide who's now giving me.
What is causing him then to have them trained in black ops tactics, like black ops operators? I have that right from the source.
And who is your source?
A Navy SEAL who is training 350 of those agents here in Texas.
This is not some. Yes, I'm under the impression thousands and thousands of new IRS agents are going to be hired by the administration to enforce the $800 billion in new taxes. The black ops is something that is news to me. If you have any information, I would love to
You just got it. I'm not going
to
to reveal the Navy SEAL, but he is an impeccable source, and he is a retired SEAL.
Okay. I'll look into it. Green shirt, yes, sir.
I have a little different take on Robert's decision. I think he on purpose, lifted to the American people to have or have not this health care. Now, here's my thought. You give us a bunch of good information today, but you didn't say not one thing that would appeal to an 18 to 30-year-old, because I don't think they have that great an interest. And I think as a Republican, you and the Republican National Committee and maybe a formed committee in Congress of Republicans is going to have to come up with an advertising campaign to make it clear to these young people why they don't want Obamacare.
Well, I appreciate the comment. I didn't come here as a representative of the Republican National Committee. I hope I said a couple of things that would appeal to younger people. Number one, half of all college grads can't find a full-time job. They know that. They have figured it out. In a number that I have talked to, I would say the bloom is off the president's rose, at least with respect to young people who've gone from being sophomores in college worrying about where the next party is to my parents are cutting me off and I'm not finding a job. So we have to convince those people that the president's health care program is a major impediment to their job, to their future. Second of all, I hope, and I spend a lot of time trying to bring facts about how precarious the finances of this nation are. Right now, America, and I know it sounds like a harsh term, but I believe it, America is engaged in a night of generational theft. Americans right now today, we are stealing the future of our children and grandchildren. I would hope and pray that if you're 18 to 55, you care about the future. Again, my son is 8, my daughter is 10. The opportunity that I value most as an American is the opportunity for my children to have a better life than I've had. And I've had a great life. I've had a great life with all kinds of blessings and hope and opportunity. But the Gallup poll that has been running this question for decades, ask the American people, do you think your children will have a better future than you? The majority of the American people say no, and I understand why. And I hope that we can get that message to young people that something's very wrong, that the generation ahead of you that has experienced more now believes you're going to have fewer opportunities and fewer freedom. Now, maybe there's a smarter, better way to say all this, and again, I'm always open to this. But I would hope young people would care about whether or not we mortgage their future, and I would hope and believe that we could help them connect the dots, that ultimately, when small business people, medium-sized business people, Fortune 50 CEOs all say, this is hurting us from giving you a job, that they would hopefully understand that, wake up and smell the coffee. Yes, sir. Another green shirt, dark green shirt, light green shirt to dark green shirt.
Would you please explain, Jeb, executive privilege and where the White House gets its backing or this opportunity or whatever you want?
Yeah, I guess you're speaking about Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, this last week was a very disturbing week in the nation's capital. I did not relish the vote to hold the Attorney General in contempt, but here's what I know. Brian Terry, an American citizen who donned a uniform to serve his country, is dead because of what this Justice Department did. His family, the American people, deserve to know the truth. Not part of the truth, not a lot of the truth, but the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The Justice Department lied to the American people and to Congress 10 months ago when they said, no, there's no gun running activity here. 10 months later, they reversed themselves. Chairman Issa has been negotiating with Attorney General Holder for months. This could have been avoided. Months. And then at the 11th hour, a White House that says they had nothing to do with this at the 11th hour, actually it wasn't the 11th hour plus 30. They said, we invoke executive privilege. Well, there's nothing to invoke executive privilege on unless the White House is involved. Otherwise, you don't exercise executive privilege. So, clearly it's not going to, it's not going to end up in the criminal courts. It's going to be in the civil courts. The Justice Department is not going to enforce anything against their own Attorney General.
But how can that override the Congress? Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, it's now in the third branch of government. It's in the courts. The courts are the ones in charge of enforcing our laws. And I hope and believe, again, that the American people will have their voices heard on this matter. But I think to some extent I've seen a pattern where this administration has been a little fast and furious in ignoring this Constitution. Right here, front row.
The Congress has had a few opportunities to hold the debt ceiling, and it has, I think, not done that. Basically, negotiations between Governor and President McConnell have resulted in raising the debt ceiling by as much as the guy spent over the budget in his previous several years. So, what can why can't the Congress just simply say the debt ceiling is held?
The question is about the debt ceiling. And yes, the debt ceiling has been increased once or twice through negotiations. I don't know what November is going to look like. The short answer is yeah, Congress can refuse to increase the debt ceiling. I would say that here's a way to look at it. The debt ceiling has everything to do with whether or not you pay current obligations. Most people believe, yeah, you ought to pay your current obligations, but if you're not living within your means, you cut up the credit cards. And you don't make the same mistakes going forward. This is a nation that isn't just operating on borrowed money, we are operating on borrowed time. I think there's very precious little time left to get us back on the road to fiscal sanity. In some respect, Europe is making our situation worse in that their house is in worse order. We continue to be the flight to safety, and so people still invest here in our treasuries. It's kind of like the old story, you know, two hunters out in the woods. Well, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. And believe it or not, we're actually looking a little better than Europe. What was done differently, and I'm not saying we should be satisfied with this, but for the first time, I think in history, I could be wrong on that, but I think in history, spending was dropped by an equivalent amount that the debt ceiling was increased. Now, relative to historic standards, that's huge. Relative to the size of our debt challenge, it doesn't even qualify to be. So could Congress do that? Yeah, Congress could. Right now, on an annualized cash flow basis, we have enough money to pay the bondholders. So that's a non-issue. We have enough money to keep current on Medicare, on Social Security, to pay troops in harm's way, and then frankly, we're out of money. Don't even have the rest of the money to fund the rest of the Pentagon. Don't have the money for the border control. You would like to come up with a smart, negotiated solution so that overnight you don't have what happens in Greece. But I agree with you. Congress may have to do that and may have to do that soon. I'd like to see what the results are in November before I have to make up my mind on that again. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Thank you so much for having the town hall meeting so that we can communicate with you, although I'm sure a lot of us do that by email as well. We really appreciate you hearing us out. And after Obamacare is repealed and y'all start working on a different health care plan, I'd like to see some of the alternative medicine options be available in that. I've got a holistic doctor and a naturopath and then a regular doctor. And I don't get much help from my health insurance for the holistic doctor and the naturopath. And they're the ones that seem to be making more progress as far as I'm concerned, because they're trying to treat the cause. They're not just giving me a pill that's treating the symptom. Thank
Well,
you.
that's a good observation. I don't know off the top of my head what could be or should be done in that. But part of our common sense solutions has got to be to incent wellness and not just have a fee-for-service system. It has to be disease management, incent wellness, and somehow as part of that system, the comments you made are important. So I'll continue to look in that, make sure I've got all your contact information. And, yes, ma'am.
I understand that last week when all this was going on the 25th of June, that the president passed an emergency executive order. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, ma'am, he passes some kind of executive order.
I'm ready to take control over nearly anything, so I'm very excited.
I'm not familiar, again, he passes so many executive orders
I know Kate
that
Ranger had written and sent something out.
I just don't, I'll look into it.
Think
There's
about
so
it.
many executive orders.
But this was supposed to, with the Russian thing, but then they started naming all the other things that were included in the order.
Well, I gotta tell you, a lot of this, frankly, is Congress's fault over several decades. Congress as the decades have gone by, has centralized more and more and more power in the administration. There's supposed to be 3 co-equal branches of government. And there's a reason the founders listed Congress as Article 1. And so, a lot of times when people object to what the president is doing under these executive orders, I do too, but frankly, most of the time, it is a lawful exercise of executive power given to him by some previous Congress. The solution has got to come with Congress cutting back the powers and obviously you, the people, holding members of Congress like me accountable for these decisions. And I'm sorry, I've been looking out of my periphery, as I should.
Question. Congress has a limited number of tax buckets, per se. They could put this new health care, the non-affordable health care.
Apparently, we have one more tax bucket we didn't know we had.
But will Congress get to put this in, and I think that's spelled out, which type of taxes and each
Well,
type
we've got excise tax, we have duties, we've got the income tax.
and each one of them has constraints to it, would you say? So how are we, do you see Congress hitting one of those buckets and how you deal with those constraints?
It's a good question. I do not have a good answer. I think a lot of it, because I'm still a little taken aback, because I don't see this taxing authority in the Constitution as 5 Supreme Court justices do. So we still have a number of of constitutional scholars who are poring over the law now to see exactly what is the next step for Congress. It's a little too early after the decision to know exactly how we pigeonhole this tax and what we do with it. Yes, sir, in back.
How is it that the Supreme Court of the United States does not know the Constitution and that there has been a law against something that has been explicitly illegal and not to exist in the United States for over 120 years? Because the 13th Amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, some more, shall exist in these United States. Therefore, Obamacare requiring action by any citizen makes them a slave or requires them to do an involuntary servitude. It shall not exist in these United States. And the First Amendment says that we can redress our government for grievances. So I'm presenting it to you. What do we do about a Supreme Court that doesn't follow the law?
Y'all aren't asking easy questions. And I don't mean to make light of it. You're right. What do you do with the Supreme Court? Again, the Supreme Court, for the moment, has the last word on constitutionality. But that doesn't mean they have the correct word on constitutionality. 4 of the justices said, you other 5 got it completely wrong. There was a time when the Supreme Court said Dred Scott was the law of the land. There was a time that the Supreme Court said separate but equal in Plessy v. Ferguson was the law of the land. The Supreme Court doesn't always get it right. And again, it's a very profound question. What does one do when one disagrees ultimately with the Supreme Court ruling? I know one thing. We could use a new president making better Supreme Court appointments. And unfortunately, the last president, I'm not sure quite got it right. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I was curious. I've been studying this for quite a few years. But why is it that it seems that our government is trying their best to run our country in a ditch. I realize that, that they want supreme power, they want money, they want complete control. Why isn't something being really done about it? It started back, I remember when George Bush #1 said, one world order, that sort of thing. And, there is a leader, it's called Jesus Christ, and the devil is not going to bring salvation to your soul, I can tell you that right now. But why does Congress and the Senate continue to let Obama and his band of thieves continue with what they're doing? I mean, it's just as plain as you standing right there, sir. I'm not the smartest person in here. I know that. But good grief, I got that figured out from the way back. I would appreciate your answer on that.
Because elections have consequences, and there are many people in this nation who live in Massachusetts, who live in New York, who live in San Francisco, California, and they fundamentally, I forgot Chicago. I mean, sir, I don't get it. I don't understand my countrymen who would send a Nancy Pelosi to just out of sheer curiosity. I wouldn't mind going to Boston, Massachusetts, and trying to figure out who is it that wants to send Barney Frank My point is, listen, this has been trampled on since the New Deal. And what vestiges of limited constitutional government in the Interstate Commerce Clause, the Enumerated Powers Clause, the Necessary and Proper Clause, I feel may have just been trampled fully underfoot by this Supreme Court ruling. But to some extent, and I don't have the exact phrase, and I don't agree with the sentiment that you can avoid interpreting the Constitution as the Supreme Court, but Justice Roberts essentially said in so many words, we're not qualified to make political decisions, and we're not going to save you from the consequences of your own electoral actions. And again, the Supreme Court was heard on Thursday. And I guess the closest I can come to offering a good answer to the question is, the people will be heard on the first Tuesday in November. And my view of history is that it's not so much that numbers determine the destiny of great nations. It's intensity. It's how a passionate minority of Americans can help drive public policy for the good or the bad. And traditionally, those who believed in an activist government, in a redistributive philosophy, that government knows best, that it's not about equality of opportunity, it's about equality of outcome. It's not about wealth creation, it's about wealth redistribution. It's not about meritorious fairness, it's about redistributive fairness. Frankly, for years and years, up until really this last election, those people have been helping drive the decisions in Washington, D.C. And so ultimately, there are some questions that are going to have to be decided at the ballot box. And we have been slowly but surely losing our essential freedoms, I would argue, since the New Deal. Occasionally we get a bit of a reversal, like with the Reagan administration, but it just stops it. And so the American people at some point are going to have to decide what truly is the essence of American exceptionalism. And what is the purpose? Is this just a historic anachronism that kids study in junior high school that has no relevance to our lives today? I mean, what is it we are teaching our children today? I don't believe this president believes in American exception. He may believe that America is unique, like France is unique, and Greece is unique. But fundamentally, I do not believe that he thinks that this is a blessed land where a creator has endowed us with unalienable rights, that never in the history of mankind have the blessings of liberty ever been enjoyed in greater abundance than in this land, a land where ordinary people can achieve extraordinary results, where you're only limited by the size of your dreams. I don't believe that's the country the president believes in. I think, frankly, he believes in a European-style social democracy. That's what that 2,800-page bill is all about. So he's damaging the decline of America. And now the people will have to have their voices in November. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask you, I know that you're up there and you are trying to do your best, but I would like to hear you come sometime and say, I have read the bill. I have stood for you people and said no. No. When a bill is wrong, it's no, and I want you to read it. That's the trouble. Nobody reads it. You all have a whip or somebody that say, get out there and vote, get it done,
Well,
and
ma'am,
you say no.
with all due respect, I got to about page 3 and I knew I didn't want to vote for this. And I'm not sure, I didn't need to read 2,900 pages.
Well,
Fundamentally, I knew that bill was flawed. And yes, I will tell you the system is flawed. The federal government is trying to control too many things across too many avenues of human action, and there is no way that one individual can ponder it. We have now, by one estimation, 10,000 federal programs spread across 600 different government agencies. I mean, just last week, we're sitting here in the middle of this incredible constitutional debate, and next thing you know, I'm hearing a debate about roll your own cigarettes. I'm thinking, what is the federal government involved in the issue of roll your own cigarettes? I will say this. I mean, part of this process is being accountable to you. I'm accountable for every vote I have taken. And I wish the federal government was doing a few things well and had a limited jurisdiction. But the number of bills that come my way each week, I'm not sure physically I would be capable of reading every single page of every single bill. Now, you get to hold me accountable. And I employ a staff with your taxpayer money. And they know what I'm looking for, and I identify certain portions, and they bring portions of bills to me so that I can see, is this commensurate with my principles, the principles that I have run on and that you can hold me accountable on. But I'm not going to look somebody in the eye and tell them something that isn't truthful, and I don't think I can physically read every bill. Because I read a lot of legislation just to decide what am I going to co-sponsor that may never actually be debated on the House floor. But what's most important, again, is that I tell you that I'm working for constitutional government, limited government, fiscal sanity, free enterprise, and individual freedom, and I try to vote for bills that fit that. And again, you get to hold me accountable every 2 years. Gentlemen in the red cap.
Sir, isn't the House supposed to initiate all bills, and then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate and the House get together, and they sort of get it together, and the reason why I say that is this. How did Harry Reid go behind closed doors to a 2,700-page law, send it back to the House, And then Nancy Pelosi gets up there and says, hey, we gotta pass this before you can read it. This to me is dumb.
Under our Constitution, bills that have a revenue component have to emanate from the House. And technically, what happened in the passage of the President's health care program, I'm trying to recall the exact history. I'm having a flashback here. I prefer not to have. They essentially vacated an otherwise existing House bill. So it technically met the requirements of having been initiated in the House, although in reality, you could argue otherwise. But at the time, the President had huge majorities in the House, he had huge majorities in the Senate, and frankly, it was a little bit like a basketball player in the court doing layups and dunks, and nobody else was in there. He had 60 votes in the Senate. So he was going to do what he was going to do, which again is why elections have consequences. White shirt and jacket.
Yes, sir. Seems like from the beginning with the health care bill that President Obama was using terms that was used frequently when he's trying to press a bill or policy through. There's an urgency for health care change. We're living in extraordinary times, and it's another crisis. Then we had the Speaker of the House saying, read, pass the bill, then read. After that occurs, then we hear of vouchers, not only for the President and his family, for the Congress, for the unions, and I guess the czars, and anybody else that's elected. That concerns me. The bill's not good enough, or the law, for anybody else, including the President on down. It's not a good bill for us. I strongly believe that this health bill and law stays as it is written, our children and grandchildren will not ever be able to attain the American dream. Thank you, sir.
Well, as you know, I don't disagree with your assertion. One thing, though, I feel strongly that, yes, with the possible exception of the speech and debate clause in the Constitution, members of Congress ought to live under the laws that they pass. It may be a small thing, but if you do not know it, I do not live in Washington. I work in Washington, but I live in Texas. I commute back and forth every week. I've got enough frequent flyer miles to go to Mars and back. But for your information, under the law, members of Congress are in the same boat as everyone else. We will be thrown, beginning in 2014, into the state exchanges, like I suspect many other citizens will, since so many employers will drop their coverage. Today, I have something called the Federal Employee Health Benefit Plan, which is what most federal workers receive, which is frankly the kind of health care plan you ought to be receiving, which is a premium support plan, roughly 20 plans my wife and I get to choose from. We pay some. You, my employer, the federal taxpayer, pays some. If I want a basic plan, then I don't pay much. If I want a Cadillac plan, I pay a lot. Anyway, that all goes away in 2014. And members of Congress are thrown in. Now, having said that, curiously enough, not everything you see on the internet is well, frankly, some of it is true. And they seem to have written a policy to where certain senior staff are actually excluded and they get to keep their plan. Funny how that worked out. But members of Congress will be thrown into the state exchanges beginning in 2014. Yes, sir.
My question is, you say, well, November's coming. Well, we had a November 3 years ago. We sent a lot of Republicans down to Austin. We sent a lot of Republicans to D.C. and we got squat. They said we balanced the budget in Austin, and that's not entirely true. They didn't balance it. In Washington DC, we got a house.
Well, why don't we pick on Brian first?
In Washington DC, we got Boehner for the speaker, and the first thing he said is, well, we read the Constitution. Well, you got 71 to 95, I understand, from one of your members, people in Congress who belong to the Democratic Socialists of America. And their platform is anti-American, anti-Constitution. Boehner also said that he's going to save $100 billion. Right from the get-go, we're going to save $100 billion. Well, I think it ended up being something like 30 or 50 million. The rest of it is smoke and mirrors. So we got November coming up. I don't see much to look forward to. If this Obamacare is done away with, and Congress comes up with another idea, it's going to be just another cost. It's going to be another boondoggle. It's going to be another, whatever Congress, whatever the federal government gets into, whatever the state government gets their hands into, it always costs the taxpayers one hell of a lot more than they say. We always get shafted. And the taxpayers, a lot of them are starting to get a little tired of being shafted. And we would like to have the truth one time come out of D.C. and out of Austin.
Well, hopefully you have looked at my own career. I have been battling the bankruptcy battle since the day I went into Congress. Listen, I'm not thrilled with what little has been achieved in 2 years. Congress could have refused to increase the debt ceiling. It didn't. We could have that debate. But it does touch, I'm sorry.
You mean for this year? Last year they increased it to over $2 trillion. And you know something? Back in 1828, Adams said that two ways to conquer a country. One by the sword, the other one by debt. And who do we owe our debt to? China. China's a friend. China's an enemy of ours. And all you have to do is look at the products they send to this country. They send them full of lead and full of garbage.
Well, hopefully you have been to a town hall meeting I've had on the budget. I've let everybody know half of our debt is owned by foreigners. And the single largest foreign interest that holds our debt is China. I mean, it doesn't take too much to see the day where the head of the Chinese Admiralty shows up at the Pentagon and says, I'm here for the keys to my aircraft carrier. You're not paying the bill. We right now pay China interest on the national debt. We pay them enough to buy 2 strike fighters a week and have enough money at the end of the year to put them on an aircraft carrier. I get that. I get that. So I haven't been thrilled with progress. I hope we have at least stopped some other actions of the administration. No, we haven't reversed course. We haven't reversed course. The Democrats still hold the Senate. The president still holds the White House. Much of what we want to do will take law. It takes 3, at least 3, to make law. So could we have done more had we chosen not to increase the debt ceiling? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. That moment is gone. There is one other thing I would point out. I served in the last Republican majority. I was very disappointed in it. As were the American people. They chose to sit out the election. And when they chose to sit out the election, you ended up with Barack Obama as your president and super majorities of liberals in both the House and the Senate, and we ended up with the stimulus. We ended up with Obamacare. And so, you're right to hold me accountable. You are right to be disappointed in this Congress. But I would caution anybody, and I'm not saying you said this, sir, but I would caution anybody about reaching a level of despondency, despair, or disappointment that would cause you to sit out this next election. Yes, ma'am, right there in the red.
We have such deceptive media. That's what a lot of the problems are. I know people who are deceived by the media. Who can we trust to report the truth?
The question was about deceptive media.
They glamorize a lot.
Oh, I deal with a lot of, let me tell you this though. I never thought I'd get up and defend the Fourth Estate. It depends on what you call deception. A lot of what I see on the national media, frankly, is selective covering of the issues. People, I get criticized, perhaps rightfully so. Jeb, you got to do a better job of getting your message out. Well, I held a press conference, and for 20 minutes I talked about why we ought to repeal Obamacare, and then the very first question was about some ag program. I mean, what are you going to do? And so it is very, very frustrating. I've also noticed that there aren't many journalists that I think could pass a 9th grade economics test. And so, frankly, part of it has to do with just abysmal ignorance. And then last but not least, this is empirical. Anytime there's polling done of the media, they tend to poll about 15 to 18 points more liberal than the population as a whole. So you're getting their twist. Now again, I'm not saying they're necessarily trying to be deceptive, but many of them are ignorant of economics. They view the world from kind of this collectivist orientation. Many of them do, but I will say, praise the Lord for Fox News, Mark Davis, and the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. Yes, sir. Lecture.
Yes, we're involved in the defense industry pretty heavily. We have a lot of concerns about the upcoming sequestration.
You should.
And wonder what is Congress doing to try to prevent that.
The question was about the sequester. The Budget Control Act, which in some respects is probably deceptive because it really doesn't control the budget, provided for a sequester mechanism. House Republicans are dedicated to the deficit reduction target, but so much of that disproportionately falls upon national defense, roughly half of it. If it is not changed, we will start seeing 10% real cuts in national defense at a time where we continue to be at war in a very, very dangerous war. House Republicans have moved legislation that kept true to the deficit reduction targets, but did so in a way so that we could meet all of our national defense priorities. We passed that legislation. So far, the United States Senate has put forward no legislation, and so far the President of the United States, even though his own Secretary of Defense said this would decimate our national defense. That's Panetta, Secretary Panetta, the President's own Secretary of Defense. The President has yet to put forth any plan whatsoever to deal with the sequester. The sequester was meant to be a club in the closet to force Congress to do the right thing. Now again, the deficit reduction targets are good, they're novel, but with the exception of national defense, this is kind of the side we're not coming to. What we passed means that under present budget projections, the federal government will grow by 53% over the next 10 years instead of 55%. So, but half of that is directed to national defense. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable to our war fighters. And so we in the House have passed legislation to deal with it. And the question is, are the American people going to know about it? Are they going to hold their Senate? And are they going to hold their president accountable? And again, I don't know the answer to the question. I'm going to have to apologize. How much time do we have? I apologize. We've been here about an hour 15, but we are not going to get to everybody. Ma'am, I'm going to give you the last word unless it's a really, really tough question.
Comment.
Okay, go for it.
I think Roberts ruled the way he did to get the attention of we the people on a tax. That is something they will sit up and take notice of.
If that was his purpose, he achieved it. We'll take it. Oh, that's the comment?
That's a comment. That's
Oh,
a comment.
that's the comment. Well, again, I want to thank you. Clearly, I didn't quite schedule enough time here. We usually do an hour. I did an hour and 15. I didn't quite get to everybody. I apologize for that. Again, let me thank you. And for those who didn't get to ask a question, please go on to our website, send us an email. I will get back to you. But if you care passionately that this is the right document, if you feel passionately that that is the wrong document, talk to your friends, your family members, your co-workers, people at your church. Let your voice be heard, because ladies and gentlemen, this is a nation that has a typical. The president said 3 weeks into his administration, we have begun the work of remaking America. I don't want to remake America. I want to reclaim America. I want to reclaim America for freedom, for opportunity, for the free enterprise system, for limited constitutional government. And it all starts this November. So thank you very much.